For those of you out there who suffer from vitreous floaters, number one, you are not alone. Number two, you are not forgotten. I'm Jerry Sebag. I am a vitreoretinal ophthalmologist, founding director of the VMR Institute for Vitreous Macular Retina in Huntington Beach, California. I'm a senior research scientist at the Doheny Eye Institute, affiliated with UCLA in Pasadena, California. Floaters are a visual phenomenon that arise from the center of the eye, which is filled with a gel called vitreous. When you're a kid, it's clear, but it changes throughout life. Those changes result in densities and opacities that interfere with the passage of light from the front of the eye to the back of the eye, and the shadows that are created by that interference are called floaters. Many people have vitreous floaters. Most people are able to adapt to them, but there are many cases that are more severe, and try as patients might, they're not able to adapt. They're not able to cope, and it interferes with their lives. Myodesopsia is a term that derives from the Greek myos, referring to flies. The term Vision Degrading Myodesopsia refers to those clinically significant cases, in contradistinction to floaters, which many people have and many people are not bothered by. The group of people who have vision-degrading myodesopsia has been neglected and ignored for far too long. And over the years, we've met many patients who were so severely afflicted by their floaters that it not only impacted their quality of life, but it also interfered with their path through life. It has been a very frustrating experience for patients to see their eye care professionals and not receive a sympathetic ear. That is due to the fact that there's a lack of understanding of the origin, and there's a lack of methodologies with which to evaluate a patient complaining of floaters. It's quite typical for people to have gone from doctor to doctor to doctor and never having gotten the attention or the consideration or the answers that they seek. And it's been our mission for the past 15 years or so to help that process along the way by developing methodologies with which doctors can actually measure what's going on inside the eyes of people who are complaining of floaters, and facilitate the evaluation as to whether the case is mild, moderate, or severe. That's necessary in order to set in motion a consideration of various therapies to treat the condition, because they do exist, but it's just not clear to enough doctors as well as enough patients whether they merit such treatment and which treatment would be best for their particular situation. It's really important in medicine that before you embark upon a therapy, that you really understand the condition and that you select the cases that are most appropriate for any treatments that you're going to employ. And so when we started performing ultrasonography, and with colleagues in New York figured out ways to quantify the results and develop quantitative ultrasonography, we were able to better evaluate the vitreous body, which is the source of the opacities that patients complain about when they see floaters. Using quantitative ultrasonography has enabled us to determine if the case is mild, moderate, or severe. But more importantly, it's enabled us to show the patient the structure and the abnormality that is causing their symptoms. Many doctors no longer do ultrasonography, and therefore patients seeing other doctors haven't had the benefit of understanding why they have this problem. It's always a great moment when we show a patient what's going on inside their eye as revealed by ultrasonography, so that they can connect with their condition. And they stop imagining this as a hallucination and start accepting it as a reality. Because when you see doctor after doctor after doctor who's told you, no, there's nothing in your eye, there's nothing wrong with your eye, everything is fine, you start questioning yourself. What exactly is this disconnect? Why am I experiencing this that no one else seems to understand? No one else seems to appreciate. And once they see the ultrasound and they see the source of their symptoms, it's a very good moment. It's the beginning of the solution. We also developed the measure of contrast sensitivity because one of the problems in evaluating floaters is that visual acuity, which is the measure of the size of letters that you can see on an eye chart, is not revealing. Vision degrading myodesopsia from vitreous floaters does not alter visual acuity. So if that's the only measurement that you're making, you're going to miss the boat. You're not going to really capture the patient's experience. At the recommendation of my colleague, Dr. Alfredo Sedun, we started measuring contrast sensitivity and found that on average, patients with vision degrading myodesopsia have degradation on the order of 91%. That's enormous. And there's an entire spectrum leading up to that average and even beyond. So having an ability to evaluate the structure of the vitreous, which is the source of floaters, and its impact on vision by measuring contrast sensitivity, we became very comfortable in our understanding of this patient's plight. We've also developed a self-administered questionnaire that is specific for vitreous floaters because the existing questionnaires that measure the subjective impact on quality of life seem to be insufficient. It can be used in a variety of projects to test existing therapies, but then to develop new therapies. We actually began treating vision degrading myodesopsia from vitreous floaters by performing vitrectomy. But I knew that using that surgical procedure, which has been around for 50 some odd years and which we've employed for a variety of vitreoretinal diseases, but applying it to floaters was going to be controversial. And so rather than employ a method of vitrectomy that was certain to be effective in the hopes that it would be safe, I redesigned the operation so that it would maximize safety in the hopes that it would be effective. Initially, we called that limited vitrectomy. We now refer to it as limited refractive vitrectomy because, in essence, the treatment of contrast sensitivity, which is degraded in patients with vitreous floaters, is a refractive procedure. And that appropriately places it into the category of a treatment intended to improve the visual quality of life. And because we're able to measure contrast sensitivity, we're able to measure improvement in contrast sensitivity following the therapeutic intervention. So we started off with limited refractive vitrectomy and have done hundreds and hundreds of patients with that and have published widely our experience, which has basically been phenomenal. Patients are extremely happy. Within 1 week, abnormal contrast sensitivity is normalized, and it's sustained for months and years thereafter. But it's not for everyone. Therefore, we've recently started performing YAG laser vitreolysis, which has been done all over the world by many, many doctors. But we've done it using our quantitative objective metrics to evaluate whether we're actually making a difference. We measure their contrast sensitivity before undergoing the laser treatment and at several points in time after. And I'll have to say, I was skeptical that it would work. I just didn't think that it was enough of an intervention to make a difference. Well, I'm happy to report that I was wrong. To enable patients to achieve a level of happiness that I didn't really expect has been a wonderful experience. It's not for everyone. We're learning and are much better at selecting the right cases for YAG laser treatments. So we have to prioritize safety and seek efficacy. And we've made lots of people very happy with a non-invasive treatment that uses a YAG laser. In the future, I'm sure it'll be replaced by other forms of laser energy, but today, with the right cases, it's quite effective. A YAG laser treatment is designed to use a specific type of laser, that's called a YAG laser, that is focused onto the opacities within the vitreous body that are casting the shadows that people see as floaters. When we focus the laser onto the opacities and break them down, apparently people are very happy with that outcome. And we've also found out that contrast sensitivity improves. There's an increasing level of interest and activity in better understanding, better evaluating, and better treating vitreous floaters. What's required for a major innovation is industry support. There needs to be investment of time, money, and effort at a level such as a big technology company or a large pharmaceutical company to develop widespread use of new methodologies to treat the condition. But as with everything else, it begins in a lab, it begins in a clinic, it begins in an institute. And there are a number of things going on throughout the world. Some people are using different lasers than YAG. I'm working with a group at the University of Ghent where nanoparticles have been developed that, in conjunction with low-level laser energy, can break up the opacities within the vitreous body and lessen the impact, decreasing the shadows that they create. I'm also working with a group in Poland to improve imaging of the vitreous body and quantify those images so that we can get even more powerful insights into what's going on inside the vitreous of people with floaters. We recently concluded a study of MRI imaging of the vitreous body and how it lights up when people's eyes move. One of the fallacies in our evaluation of patients in general, but with floaters in specific, is that we measure vision in a dark room with a high contrast screen and assume that those measurements in our offices and in our clinics are representative of what it's like for this individual to live with the vision that they have. That's just not true. We move our heads, we move our eyes when we're driving, when we're reading, when we're using computer monitors. And with respect to vitreous floaters, the displacement of the opacities that can often be off-axis into the optical axis is a very disturbing experience for many patients. But we don't have ways to measure that. We don't have ways to quantify that. So we're developing that in anticipation of improving our understanding of the biophysics of vitreous, but also improving our ability to evaluate patients complaining of floaters with respect to how they impact their lives. Getting that level of understanding and improving the knowledge base about the biophysics and biochemistry of vitreous will usher in what I think is going to be a very exciting therapy, that being pharmacologic vitreolysis, the development of drugs that can be injected into the eye to dissolve the opacities that are creating the shadows that people see as vitreous floaters and vision degrading myodesopsia. Whenever there's a condition or a disease that modern medicine isn't able to fully understand and isn't able to treat, you see people coming together on their own. And there are various groups throughout the world that are composed of patients with vision degrading myodesopsia, such as Myodesopsia International, such as the VDM Project, two organizations that I'm personally involved with. But there are others. It's typical of the way people channel their energies when they don't find satisfaction within the traditional halls of medicine. And I'll be the first to admit we have underserved people with floaters for far too long. And it has resulted in the frustration and the inclination to organize. And I applaud that. I think that's going to be a very useful force to improve things in the future. A groundswell of expressions by people suffering from floaters, and there are many. They just need to come forth. They need to connect with one another, either via websites or different organizations, and in a collective voice, shout out to governments, to institutes of health, to corporations throughout the world, that this is a problem they need to pay attention to. And I think that call will resonate. And I think that with large enough numbers and loud enough voices, we will be heard. And I think that we'll see some major progress in the not too distant future.